Let me move now beyond Brexit and talk about Britain on the global stage, talk about our position, our ambition, our values. Because many after the referendum took that as a sign that the UK was turning in on itself. And in fact, the opposite is the case. And the UK is one of the very few countries that spends both 0.7% of GDP on aid, but also 2% on defence. We are the 5th or 6th, and the numbers seem to vary, biggest economy in the world. We're committed to our membership of NATO, our seat at the UN Security Council, the G7, the G20, our leading role in the Commonwealth, as we are the current chair in office. And our foreign policy is predicated, of course, on our national interests and on our prosperity and our security, but also on our values. Democratisation, multilateralism, the rule of law and human rights. We're committed to protecting our environment, tackling climate change, promoting equal education globally as the best chance that anyone has of bettering their life chances. We're committed to upholding and reforming the international rules-based order to ensure it's fit for purpose, and to protecting and preserving global norms, such as the norm against the use of chemical weapons, which we collectively underlined at a recent meeting of the states parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention in The Hague. And that was a meeting that we convened and in which New Zealand very much supported. We also, again, this is a values thing, it's a belief thing, just like New Zealand, we see free trade as a global good. Not just in economic terms, in terms of boosting prosperity, but also because it enhances bilateral relations and it ensures a level of cooperation and interdependence and multiple interconnectedness that reduces the risk of conflict. So when we leave the EU, we will become a fully independent member of the WTO. We will be championing free trade, campaigning for a more effective WTO. And you may have noticed that we have also announced our interest in potentially joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, and we've opened a public consultation on that basis. Beyond that, we never stand still. You can never stand still in foreign policy, because I think if you stand still, you're going backwards. And there are important changes in this part of the world too, and we're increasing our presence in the Pacific and opening 3 new high commissions in Tonga, Vanuatu and Samoa. Now, Samoa is completely new. Tonga and Vanuatu we had been present in the past and we are reopening. Now that's motivated by a number of things, partly a recognition that we haven't been sufficiently present in the Pacific in recent past, and that there are very important partners there, very important Commonwealth partners. Partly it's motivated by our shared commitment and urgency in tackling climate change, and of course some of these Pacific Island states are on the front line in terms of dangerous climate change, and I think it's the Prime Minister of Tuvalu who says if you save Tuvalu, you save the world. And it's also motivated by a sense of what we can do, what value we can bring there, partly with our traditions of justice and the rule of law, and of course the similarities between many of our judicial and government systems and those in Pacific Island nations. It's also finally very much a response to a clear desire from New Zealand and Australia and other partners for the UK to be more engaged in the Pacific. So I've sort of scattered it throughout, but let me focus now a bit more on what this means for UK and New Zealand in all this. Well, first, in a Brexit context, it means that we fully support New Zealand's strong relationship with the European Union, and negotiations recently launched for an EU-New Zealand free trade agreement. We see that as complementary to, rather than competing with, a post-Brexit FTA between the UK and New Zealand. Secondly, I think that the opportunity and imperative to work together on the global stage is greater than ever. And we're delighted that this government has put climate change at the heart of its foreign policy, and is in fact looking to the UK's model for its domestic legislation and architecture. We need to work together to tackle this existential threat, but also to protect the taonga of our wildlife and natural resources, particularly our oceans. And we also want to work alongside New Zealand in the Pacific and beyond, in all areas, in upholding the rules-based international order, in tackling the threat of terrorism and hostile states, and championing free trade, as I've mentioned. And thirdly, in a bilateral context, we want to continue to build on the strong links between our two countries and also to future-proof those links. I think our shared commitment to an ambitious free trade agreement is obvious. And that ambition is about the economic benefits for both our countries, but it's also more than that. It's about a shared aspiration, shared vision for the future. And I think that our bilateral FTA will demonstrate what two like-minded countries can do in a trade agreement, focusing not just on the bottom line, but on how to progress broader objectives on, for example, the environment, gender, inequality. And my hope is that we will be able to use the UK-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, which is likely to be one of the first that we managed to get agreed. We will be able to use that to set the tone for our future trade policy. And even though we are, of course, still part of the European Union, we have already started a trade policy dialogue with New Zealand, and I think we're meeting in September, but perhaps for the 4th or 5th time, doing a lot of the groundwork. So we're really laying the groundwork now, so that when we Brexit next year, we can negotiate properly with a view to really progressing fast once we're out of the implementation period. So let me conclude. Well, we live in interesting times, I think that much is obvious, and British politics are certainly more interesting than they've ever been before in my lifetime, and I dare say there are some who are nostalgic for the days when things are a bit more boring. You could say the same thing about global politics, and I'm sure there are some in the US that might say the same thing too. And of course, in a Brexit context, there will be more noise to come as the negotiations reach their end point. But while getting the Brexit arrangement right, getting the right Brexit arrangement is rightly a major preoccupation and a major priority, we shouldn't let it obscure how much else is going on in the world, and the role that global Britain can play, together with partners like New Zealand, in tackling shared threats, protecting and pursuing common goods, and bit by bit, making the world a better place. Thank you.